things of interest in this reading of Christmas Carol. One is that it's from Dickens's own personally chosen text from his novella, given as a public reading in 1853. He gave 472 public readings, including 27 for charity and 75 in America. They so excited him that, for instance, when he gave the reading of Sykes murdering Nancy, his doctor discovered that his pulse rate went up from 72 to 124. So undoubtedly it shortened his life. The readings began in 1853 and he died in 1870. Second thing, this character of Scrooge shows one of the central motifs in Dickens. It's the change of heart. He badly wants a character to undergo a sort of moral conversion, based on the Christian model perhaps, Christian in Pilgrim's Progress, and the burden falls off his back and down the great cavernous hole never seen again at the foot of the cross. So he contrives to hold up a mirror or a glass to the central character, and they see the bad consequences of what they've done, and so they change. Miss Havisham sees the results, and Pip and Estella, and she says, her face changes to a ghastly stare of remorse. What have I done? What have I done? When she first came, I meant to save her. Take the pencil and write. Bella Wilfer sees Mr. Noddy Boffin apparently act out a full array of greedy, miserly positions, and so she shifts from her initial position, I want money, I want it dreadfully. Sometimes violence is necessary. The lawyer Eugene Rayburn is battered into submission. Sometimes you have to go to America, which is where Martin Chuzzlewit goes, in the middle of a pestiferous swamp, in the height of a fever. He undergoes his change. Mr. Gradgrind sees his daughter lifeless on the floor and is forced to reconsider his theories of education. And sometimes the whole thing is a lengthy process, as when Pip takes the whole novel to make this change for the better. And the third point that strikes me, anyone who reads Dickens must be struck by it. The characters have a sort of manic force, like what's coming from a fire hydrant, as if they'd stepped down out of the frame of the German expressionist painting. There they are, manic. But also there's a depressive underside which comes out at night in the hallucinatory and terrifying experiences of Scrooge, Fagin. Miss Havisham's left the daylight out of her life for more than 20 years, and when they finally reach daylight, some of these characters really have no choice left but to die. So there are psychological interests as well, manic depressive. A Christmas Carol in 4 staves. Only the first 2 tonight. Stave 1, Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how long, how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend, his sole mourner. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand of the grindstone, was Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? Going to come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. But what did Scrooge care? Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, upon a Christmas Eve, the old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting, foggy weather, and the city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like 1 coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of a strong imagination, he decidedly failed. "Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew. "Ah, humbug!" "Christmas a humbug? You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do. Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books and having every item in them brought through a round dozen a month presented dead against you. If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding, buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge said he would see him, that he would see him in that extremity first. "But why?" said Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" "Why did you get married?" "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love?" growled Scrooge, as if that were the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." His nephew left the room without an angry word notwithstanding. The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in, portly gentlemen, with books and papers in hands, and they bowed to him. "Scrooge and Marley, I believe," said one of the gentlemen. "At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time." "There are no prisons." "Plenty of prisons, but under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christmas cheer of mind, Christian cheer of mind or body. A few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. What shall I put you down for?" "Nothing. You wish to be anonymous." "I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and the workhouses. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. But many can't go there, and many would rather die. They'd rather die, and they'd better do it. Decrease the surplus population." At length the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge, dismounting from his stool, tacitly admitted the fact the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put his hat on. "You want all day tomorrow, I suppose?" "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient, and it's not fair." "It's only once a year, sir." "Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. Oh, I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning." Clark promised that he would, Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling. He took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, having read all the newspapers, beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book. He went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, rooms in the lowering pile of building upper yard. Now it is the fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of this house, except that it was very large. And yet, Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without us undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. With a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but it looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, ghostly spectacle turned up upon its ghostly forehead. Now Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon and was a locker again. He said, "Oh," closed the door with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. Yes. Before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, small fire in the grate. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room, communicated for some purpose now forgotten, with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This was succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. He heard the noise much louder on the floors below, and coming up the stairs, coming straight towards his door, came on through the heavy door, and a spectre passed into his room, the room before his eyes. On its coming in, the dying flame leapt up as though it cried, "I know him! Marley's ghost!" Same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtailed, usual waistcoat, tights and boots. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he never believed it until now. Really bowels of compassion, I guess. Though he looked the phantom through and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes and noticed the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, he was still credulous. "Who are you?" "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" "I can." "Do it then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair. But the ghost sat down as if he were quite used to it. "You don't believe in me." "I don't." "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because a little thing affects them. Slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than a grave about you, whatever you are." But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round its head as though it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast. Ah! Dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me? Why do spirits walk the earth? Why do they come to me? It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, travel far and wide, and if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house, mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me. Business. Mankind was my business. At this time of the rolling year I suffer most. Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate. Hear me, my time is nearly gone. I will. Don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray. I'm here tonight to warn you that you have a chance and hope of escaping my fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. I'd rather not. Without their visit, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow night when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us. We walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little so that when the apparition reached it, it was wide open. It floated out through the self-opened window into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands. Bolts were understirred. Scrooge tried to say, "Help!" but stopped at the first syllable. He went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant. Stave 2, the first of the 3 spirits. The church clock tolled a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. The light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn by a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about his neck and down its back, was white, as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using in its duller moments a great extinguisher for a cap which it now held under its arm. "Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" "I am." "Who and what are you?" "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" "No, your past. The things that you will see with me are shadows of the things that have been. Rise and walk with me." It had been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes. The bed was warm and the thermometer a long way below freezing, but he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown and nightcap, grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. They passed through the wall and stood in the busy thoroughfares of the city. It was Christmas time. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it? I was apprenticed here. They went in. At sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that it would be 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling, Scrooge cried in great amazement, It's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again! Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7, actually 10 to 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo there, Ebenezer, Dick." A living and moving picture of Scrooge's former self, a young man, came briskly and accompanied by his fellow apprentice. Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Oh, fellow apprentice. Yes. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. "Yo, my boys," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up before men can say Jack Robinson. Here away, my lads. Let's have lots of room here." And in a twinkling, the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers, whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. Well, they all came. Anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went. 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle, up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place. New top couple starting off again as soon as they got there. All top couples at last, not a bottom one to help them. When this result brought about, old Fezziwig, clapping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" Fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose. When the fiddler struck up Sir Roger de Coverley, old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance. You wouldn't have predicted at any given time what would become of them next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, turn your partner, bow and curtsy, cork through a screw, thread the needle and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her Merry Christmas. Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a black dress, in whose eyes there were tears. "It matters little," she said softly to Scrooge's thought self. "To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me." "What idol has displaced you?" "Golden one. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off, one by one. till the master passion gain engrosses you. I release you with a full heart of the love of him you once were. Spirit, remove me from this place. I can't bear it. Leave me. Take me back. Hold me no longer. As he struggled with the spirit, he was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. That's hard work.